Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Saya Dr. Norshafizah Hanafi daripada UUM. Okay, today for my paper presentation is titled The Profitability Factors Influencing of Islamic Banking in Malaysia. Okay, this paper or this research is done with my student, which is Irfan bin Burhanuddin. Okay, so the purpose of this research is to investigate the relationship between the determinants of liquidity, asset management, economic factors towards the profitability ratio of the Islamic finance in Malaysia. Islamic banking is referred to a finance or banking activities that complies with Sharia law and principle which guided by the Islamic economics. Since 1983, Islamic banking has developed in Malaysia with the introduction of the Islamic Banking Act 1983 and the Government Investment Act 1983. This study is expected to contribute benefits to the banking industry and the country in order to manage their financial performance as well as increase their profitability. Banks also are playing vital roles in our society, and it is impossible to imagine a life without banking. In other words, banks are supposed to be oxygen of an economic, and government of any country strengthen their economic through monetary tool via banking system. And all financial and individual business transactions that we are being involved in are done through the bank. Okay, literature review for this study. We are studying on the Islamic banking as we noticed that financial and economic crisis of 21st century has occurred mainly due to the conventional banking system. So Islamic bank model are one those model which will help to get rid of interest and consequences of its non-payment. All tools of Islamic bank are according to the Sharia mode of financing, which is interest-free. In 1983, the first Islamic bank in Malaysia was set up. In 1993, merchant bank, commercial bank, and financial institutions were permitted to provide Islamic financial products and services through the Islamic banking scheme. Okay. For this study, our DV is financial performance, which is profitability ratio. So the banking Islamic concept was first implemented in Malaysia in 1983 with first bank called Bank Islam. And the growth of Islamic banking in Malaysia was rapid when the government opened the opportunity for foreign Islamic bank in Malaysia in 1999. So by early 2000, most of the local commercial bank had implemented in Sharia law as a window of their banking product, Islamic banking product. So the finding from Mohtar 2008 showed that the performance of the Islamic banking industry in Malaysia had improved. Okay, a study by Siraj and Pillai 2012, this assessment showed that Islamic banks are strongly equity finance, and yet traditional bank fund depends on debts. So level of equity fund in conventional bank was 55.12%, but in Islamic bank it was 73.80%. So expansion in operating income was faster than operating expenses in Islamic bank compared to the conventional bank. So according to the Rabah Yunus 2016 studied that the impact of the financial performance of Islamic bank on the economic growth in terms of financial liberalization through the use of Islamic bank in all Tunisia, Great Britain, Bahrain, Saudi Arabia, Abu Dhabi over the period of 2001 to 2012. And our independent variables, first is liquidity. So liquidity can describe on how rapidly the Islamic bank can change assets into cash to satisfy the needs of moneylenders and borrowers. So according to the Samad 2004, it stated that if the bank have more liquid asset, the more significant level of liquidity the bank will. In a study by Arif 2014, he utilized the liquid asset to total asset as independent variable for measure bank capacity to tackle monetary commitments and responsibilities. Moreover, the higher proportion in loan to total asset ratio, implies that the bank are more fluid. Subsequently, predominant degree of liquidity is connected with bank profitability. So, meaning that liquidity have a relationship with the bank profitability. And independent variable number 2 is asset management. So the asset management alludes on how Islamic banking and Islamic financial institutions manage their statement of financial position. So this organization offers services that reveal them to the risk related to market, capital, credit, interest rate, and liquidity. So TB 2011 in his study mentioned that the main point of interest of Islamic Bank are the needs to further develop asset structure to guarantee the profitability of bank from their business operation as well as to minimize the risk. So using loan to total asset ratio discovered a positive relationship between liquidity and profitability according to Wong and Hoi 2009. Okay, independent variable number 3 is economic factors. So the economic factors relate to the gross domestic product, which is GDP, and financial development of the GDP is the most generally perceived macroeconomic science, which plan to analyze whole monetary occasion inside an economy. According to UNESCO, 2014 utilized a real gross domestic product growth rate GDPGR to measure macroeconomic surroundings. So the research contained that GDPGR is the most reasonable sign of the status of financial development. Weak economic status can really deteriorate the superiority of the loan set, so hence decreasing profitability. So the development of financial status may affect the profitability of microfinancial institution, which is MFI, and it can conclude that GDPGR has a positive relationship with MFI profitability. Okay, the problem statement for this study is it's come from the many various study, and this is based on the report by the International Monetary Fund (IMF). Profit of Islamic Bank are low because they have higher overhead and structural costs. So Islamic Bank lower profitability could be ascribed to the higher overhead costs to revenue ratio due to the startup capital of foreign Islam banks. So from the past 5 years, Islamic banking and finance have been facing a lot of challenges and issues which include on their performance in terms of profitability. So the costs incurred of independent Islamic bank are somewhat higher compared to the dependent Islamic bank, as the latter receive the profit from the profit sharing platform. Okay. So this is the need on to study on why the profitability of Islamic banking and finance is not high compared to other banks, and it is important to study how the Islamic bank manage their liquidity and affect their profitability. And it's also have to study on the risk and return in the Islamic banking industry, keep on managing well, supported by the active risk depletion plan followed by Islamic Bank. So in terms of asset, the bank hold variable rate asset in the financing books, mostly in the form of murabahah, ijara, and musyarakah contracts. So according to the Bolarinwa and Sotten 2019, and they demonstrated that deferment or corruption affect the productivity and profitability of commercial bank in both growing and developed countries. Furthermore, economic factors can be the issue that impact the profitability of the Islamic banking and finance. Okay, research objective of this study is to examine the relationship between liquidity and profitability of the Islamic banking and finance in Malaysia. Number two, to examine the relationship between asset management and profitability ratio of the Islamic banking and finance in Malaysia. And number three, to examine the relationship between economic factors and profitability ratio of the Islamic banking and finance in Malaysia. So research question, is there any relationship between liquidity and profitability ratio? And for the hypothesis number one, there is a significant relationship between liquidity and profitability ratio. Okay, for the research question number two, is there any relationship between asset management and profitability ratio? And for the hypothesis number two, there is a significant relationship between asset management and profitability ratio. And for the research question number three, is there any relationship between economic factors and profitability ratio? And for the hypothesis number three, there is a significant relationship between economic factors and profitability ratio. Okay, significance of this study. Profitability of the banking sector is the basic for all countries, since it is a significant source of equity which prompt to increase in asset base. So it is clear to say that bank profitability is significant for the financial stability. And logically, profit are the primary goal of the Islamic bank, and it can safeguard against the losses. Furthermore, retained earning a source of capital that deemed to be important to the Islamic bank, which enable them to absorb extra losses. And bank that produce weak result may confront more fund and tend to face more challenges and risks. And more than that, the increase of profitability ratio in the banking sector will spur the economic growth of a country. Thus, this study is expected to give benefit to the banking industry and the country in order to manage their financial performance as well as increase their profitability. Scope and limitation. So this study is focused on Islamic finance company in Malaysia. And for this study, we'll be highlighting the relationship between liquidity, asset management, economic factors, and profitability. The limitation of this study is the number of Islamic bank and finance institutions involved in this research. The scope of the study due to data collected using secondary data from the annual report of the selected bank through their own website of Bursa Malaysia, which is considered a private and confidential. So this data covered for 5 years from the period of 2015 until 2019. Okay, this is the framework for this study. We have an independent variable, which is liquidity, asset management, and economics. And for the dependent variable, which is profitability ratio. So for the profitability ratio, the ratio of return on asset is used to measure the bank profitability. And for the economic, independent variable for the economic will also cover for the GDP and the inflation rate. Okay, for this study, we use the theory of managerial efficiency theory of profit. So this theory actually developed by F.H. Knight 1973. According to him, it is often argued that profit or loss arise as a result of managerial efficiency. So it can be shown in many examples that management through more efficient operation can reduce the overhead costs and structural costs, anticipate and offset changes that will be adversely impact the Islamic bank income, adopt new marketing plan, improve product quality, and expand the product line in order to increase profit. So for the external determinant, which is the economic factors such as a recession, GDP, inflation, corruption, may affect the profitability of Islamic bank and also will impact their true managerial skill adversely. according to the Joseph Schumpeter 1950. Okay, so the methodology of this study. This study is quantitative design, which investigate the relationship between the independent variable, which is liquidity, asset management, and economic factors, and the dependent variable is profitability ratio of Islamic banking and finance in Malaysia from the period of 2015 until 2019. So in Malaysia, there are a total of 22 Islamic bank population in Malaysia, where 17 out of 22 are the local Islamic bank, while the rest are international Islamic bank. So the data was collected using secondary data from the financial statement in the annual report of the 5 selected Islamic bank, which is Bank Islam, Bank Muamalat, Kuwait Finance House, Maybank Islamic, and CIMB Islamic, through their own website or Bursa Malaysia, which is considered a private and confidential. And other sources of the data also collected from the World Development Bank indicator. And unit of analysis involved is that bank indicate the data collected from the financial statement in the annual report from the 2015 to until 2019 that will be analyzed. Okay. Result and findings. So we use descriptive and also the multiple regression analysis results. So for this presentation, we focus on the multiple regression analysis result, which is we test for the hypothesis number 1, for the question number 1, for the objective number 1. So the outcome of the research indicate a negative and significant relationship between the return on asset and the cash to total asset. So the result rejected for the hypothesis number 1. And for the hypothesis number 2, or research question number 2, research objective number 2, the outcome also show a positive and significant relationship between the ROA and the total asset turnover. So the result accepted the hypothesis number 2. And for the research question number 3, the objective number 3 is about the economic factors, the relationship between economic factors and the profitability ratio. So for the GDP, the GDP one of the item tested for the economic factors. So for the GDP, the expected result is positive and significant, but the result indicate the p-value more than 10%. Therefore, the outcome would be insignificant and positive. So the hypothesis history of this research is accepted. And the result of the analysis indicate a negative and insignificant relationship between the ROA and the inflation rate. So this is inflation rate, one of the elements in economic factors that tested in this study. So the result rejected for the hypothesis number 3. Okay, so the discoveries of this research had contributed some new data and information in terms of hypothetical and empirical contribution. So the hypothetical contribution of this research were taken from the past literature review and the analysis of the past researchers. The theory applicable for this study is managerial efficiency theory of profit, and from this theory it can be said that the management of Islamic bank will bring out the outcome in either a good result, which is profit, or a bad result, which is loss. Taking into consideration of this economic factor, even though it is really impact the Islamic bank profitability, the Islamic bank should have future planning just in case the economy is not doing well to avoid any risk and loss. And for the conclusion and recommendation, the researcher suggests to include few more external factors that influence the dependent variable, as the research are more like focusing on the internal factors. So then the research should be conducted of more comparison between the Islamic and conventional bank to make the study more interesting and robust. and maybe they should compare Islamic bank between the Asian countries, and study also can be done before, current, and after the pandemic COVID-19. And from this research, the Islamic bank could be possibly raise their awareness and put in some effort in managing the asset management, expenses, and others to make their business more profitable in the future. Okay, so thank you very much. And we have a session of Q&A. Thank you.